The BMW R1100S. In this segment, I'm going to speak about the frame. Specifically, I'm going to talk about what happens to these bikes after they've been in a wreck. I can't get into the frame without speaking about the suspension. And this bit is going to be for the person who may be unfamiliar with the BMW telelever front suspension. The way the front suspension works is you have a big A-arm mounted horizontally. The bottom ends of the A are attached to each side of the engine and they pivot there. The pointy end of the A gets a ball joint. Affixed to that ball joint is a bridge which holds the two fork tubes. At the other end of the fork tubes, the end of your stanchion tubes, is attached another triple clamp with a ball joint in the middle, which is affixed to an A pillar. In between that upper A pillar and the lower A arm is located a shock absorber, a shock with a spring around it, just like you would find on the rear of your motorcycle. Up front, there's one, right in the middle of that A-arm. So as the front wheel rolls over irregularities in the road and it compresses the forks up on the stanchion tubes, the shock absorber in the middle is what does all the damping and the spring work. Inside those fork tubes is nothing. There's a little bit of oil to reduce stiction. That's all. There's no damper rods, there's no springs, there's nothing inside that you can do anything with. Oil caverns that don't take much oil. In fact, in the S model, BMW reduced the amount of oil that went into those forks to lighten the bike more. Goes to show you don't necessarily need all that oil that BMW claims you need in the telelever fork, since they took a whole bunch out for the S. That A pillar is mounted on either side of the engine, the front top of the engine, with a long through bolt which runs through both sides of the engine case. That A pillar is supported by two more support rods which are mounted to the top sides rear of the engine. The rear suspension in the old oil head models, the swing arm used to be mounted inside the transmission housing. And then you had a steel tube frame mounted to the engine and transmission, which supported the seat, tail section, pannier carriers, and such. With this new super hard frame that BMW created for the S, the swing arm was now mounted and pivots in the frame instead of the back of the transmission. This, of course, adds rigidity and improves handling and reduces weight. The rest of the framework, the steel tube, welded steel tube framework that supports the seat, footrests, pillion passenger, pannier carriers, and such, that all attaches to this super hard frame that BMW created for the S model. When these bikes are in a wreck, anytime the front is pushed over, any impact to the fairing sides, the sides of the fuel tank, any of those things can push that A pillar off center. And remember, the bottom of that A pillar is mounted with a very, very long through bolt which runs through both halves of the engine case. What do you think gives way when that pillar gets knocked off center? Anytime these bikes are in a wreck, you have to get in there and inspect very closely all of that mounting area where that through bolt goes through. They do break the engine case right open. This happened with the first S that I purchased. And I'll tell that story maybe after the end here, if there's time. These bikes are fun to ride. They are reasonable to work on. And they certainly, other than the potential for spline strippage, and of course the servo brake models are always prone to having servo brake problems. But other than that, these were pretty reliable. They were a pretty reliable bike. The R1100S models do not crash well. Be very, very wary anytime you are offered the chance to purchase one of these bikes that may have been down. Look closely for damage where, evidence that the bike's been down before. I'll tell you the tale of two R1100S's that were in my shop. The first R1100S I had worked on prior, so it was sort of a returning customer when a gentleman called me to ask me to travel some distance north and pick up his bike, which had been involved in a wreck. The wreck was caused by a girl driving a car which made a U-turn in front of him. He careened off the side of the car, ended up going down. Her insurance was to pay, and he wanted an insurance estimate. So I went north, I collected the bike. The bike had some visible damage for sure, and brought it back to my shop, and this is what it looked like. R1100S, got in a right side impact and down on the right side. As we can see, the fender's out of line. If we look here, this bridge is closer to the A-arm on this side than it is on this side, so this whole front end is racked over. Bearing's broken, bearing tab is broken, scarred up, valve cover, cylinder guard, rear turn signal, reflectors missing off the fork, and as far as the frame being bent, it's most likely this A-arm up here has been shifted over. It's very easy to total these bikes just from the accumulated damage without digging too deep. When you start finding cracked engines and cracked tabs on the frame, you're over the limit, and the insurance companies usually total the machine. And that was the case with this one. The insurance adjuster totaled it via his estimate. His estimate was slightly higher than my estimate, and they totaled the machine. Then there was some bickering, I guess, over whose insurance company was actually responsible. Anyway, it left my hands as a totaled vehicle, and the insurance company took it away. The next bike comes in. This bike's been wrecked before. The owner tells me the story, and he's already started putting the bike back together. He's put an R1150R Rockster front A-arm on the bike and a different front end. And he's had a friend who's a pretty good TIG welder weld up the tabs on the frame. You know, that super strong frame that BMW created for the S model that's not to be repaired, it's to be replaced. He welded the tabs back on so you could reattach the subframe, that welded steel tube frame that had broken free. And here's that bike. R1100S that's been wrecked. Someone started putting it back together as an R1150R Rockster front end and front A-arm on it. There's a lot of hidden damage on this. This frame mount, this is cast aluminum. It's not repairable per BMW. This is still broken. This rear mounting tab for the subframe's been welded back together. Not a great weld either. There are numerous breaks on this plastic front engine cover up top. There's a gouge here in the front engine case where the original A-arm was yanked downwards and dug into here. This is cracked here. There's other cracks further up on that plastic cover. Also on this side, on the frame mount on the top, is still cracked. This bike is definitely totaled. This should have just been scrapped for parts. And there's a lot of parts with it. So as we see, it has even further damage to the frame, and the only way you're fixing that is to remove the entire frame from the engine. And what do you think you're going to find when you do that? Bet you're going to find some cracks in the engine casing. So I declined that job because the bike was wrecked. Back to the other S, the first one I told you about here. The one that went away totaled turns up a year or so later for sale. And the reason I find out about this is someone calls me inquiring about the bike. It seems it's being advertised for sale, not being wrecked, that it has a salvage title, but that was due to an insurance fraud. The prospective buyer asks for the VIN, and then he Googles the VIN number, which turns up in my gallery, and he sees all of the videos that I've just shown to you, and inquires to the seller about such damage and has it been fixed. And this guy goes off on a tirade and claims that the insurance adjuster and myself were charged and convicted of insurance fraud and all kinds of crazy tales. And when this prospective buyer brings out the video, this guy says, there is no video. What video are you talking about? There's no video of my bike. As you've just seen the video. And that video was in this gentleman's gallery. Every bike I worked on had a photo gallery where I would put everything that I photographed and video recorded into a gallery for the customer's reference. Guess he forgot. So that was a chuckle, and that got him a little nasty gram from my lawyer friends, and that was the last I heard of that machine. That's my tale about the S and its survivability in a wreck. They don't fare well when they get crashed. Be aware of that. When you're in the market to buy one, they're all used at this point. There's no new ones around. Check them over carefully. Make sure things are straight. Make sure things haven't been re-welded that weren't supposed to be broken off and welded. If you do that, you got a better chance of getting a good machine that you can have a lot of fun with for a long, 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 long time. It's a great model. It's one of my favorite oil heads to ride. It's just a fun bike. In fact, my wife used to enjoy pillion passenger on that bike more than any other BMW model, including the K1200 LT. That's saying a lot. No? Thank you, my friends. If you like this episode, give me a thumbs up, please. Throw some comments down the bottom, and if there's enough demand, I'll get on with the next segment, which would make part 6 in this series about BMW's R1100S. And please thank my patrons over on Patreon. Those are my YouTube viewers who have come to Patreon to help support my video work with a contribution each month. Doesn't have to be a lot, doesn't have to be forever. It can be, what you can afford for however long you want to enjoy my material or support my material. You can quit at any time. I got a pretty low entry fee, It helps out a lot. It covers the electric and the internet and helps to cover costs of cameras and SD cards and hard drives and computer repairs. And I wish it covered all of that each month, but it doesn't. Regardless, if you're of the means and you like to support my work, that's where you can do it best, or a donation through PayPal works as well. If you're not, and you're here just for information, and you're broke too, how about a thumbs up here on YouTube and a subscribe if you're not a subscriber. Thank you, my friends. If you want to stick around for a couple more minutes, I'll tell you the story of the first R1100S that I bought. This was a used machine that was coming into the shop for tires. Beamers. What's that? You have an R1100RS and you're looking for a pair of tires? Yeah, I have tires for you. Why don't you come up Thursday and I'll put them on? You know where I'm at? You don't need directions? Okay. How's 10 a.m. in the morning? I'll see you then. Imagine my surprise when Thursday 10 a.m. There's no bike here for tires. And a couple of days later, I get a phone call. What's that? You got lost? You followed Route 114 from Massachusetts, expecting it to end up in New Hampshire. That's not the way. That's why I offered you directions yesterday, and you didn't want to take my directions. You knew where I was. So here I am twiddling around my thumbs. Good thing that I got other things to do, because you didn't show up. You want to come up next week? That's great. How about we do a Thursday again, 10 a.m.? See you then. Imagine my surprise when the following Thursday at 10 a.m. I get a phone call. What's that? You can't find me? Where are you? Oh, that's easy. You're right around the corner. Go out, take a left, take another left at your next street. There I am. And there he was, with a pickup truck with a BMW in the back, loaded backwards. Headlight facing out. That's an odd way to transport a bike from another state to my shop. And in the back was not the R1100RS that I was told was coming for tires. In the back was an R1100S, a Mandarin R1100S. This S was mangled, is what it was. The rear rim was missing a section 2 inches long by 1 inch wide. You could see the bead of the tire. The body was scarred, both sides, valve cover broken open. The front wheel is absolutely the most mangled front BMW wheel I have ever seen, and the wheel straightener had ever seen. The front wheel was mangled so bad that it would not make a full revolution. It was striking the brake caliper and locking the front wheel. It had struck the brake caliper so hard it had severed the brake hose. This bike was a mess. This guy still wants me to put tires on it. I'm like, hey, buddy, this bike's wrecked. First of all, it's not even the model you told me it was. You told me it was an R1100RS. This is an R1100S. It has an entirely different size wheel in the rear. And what happened to this thing? I just talked to you the other day. Was this thing wrecked like this the whole time? He's like, oh, no. I went out the other night, and I had a few at the bar, and I kind of bounced off a taxi cab and crashed into the curb. But it's all good. I got out of there and everything, and but I'm gonna have to fix the bike. I don't have insurance or anything, so I'm gonna have to pay for it. Can't you get used parts for these things? How about you do this job over the winter? You only charge me half the labor rate because it's the winter, and you use used parts. I'm laughing at this point. I'm about ready to tell the guy to go pound sand. My winters are busy. I don't work for half rate, and I'm not going to use a half rate time to go out of my way to find you used parts. This is back in the days before Beamer Boneyard, before we had internet used parts source. The guy finally leaves. I'm not working on the bike. It's totaled. He leaves. He calls me back an hour later. He wants to come back again and talk to me. He comes back, we talk. He wants to sell me the whole motorcycle as it is for a pretty decent price. I can't refuse. I buy this bike. I buy this completely wrecked R1100S. I buy the bike. The engine case is broken open. I hand that job over to my buddy Phil and his special TIG welding skills, and Phil weld that engine up all nicey nice, and I reassemble this machine with new everything. Every step I take, you find another part that's damaged. Every step you take, you find another part that's on back order. Every step you take, you find another part that's listed wrong that you end up getting, and it's not the part you need. Whew. It took a long time for that bike to go back together. It took so long for that bike to go back together. One of my friends came along and said, hey, I'll give you X to put that bike together and sell it to me. And that's what happened to that S. That went back together and served my friend for a good long time and a whole lot of miles. Good machine that was after its resurrection from its terrible abuse by its previous owner. And that's my story about that particular S. That wraps this one up. Thanks for listening. You'll see me again soon, my friends. Take care.